Thank you. So I'm last on the agenda today, and I would like to thank everybody for sticking with it and being here and hearing all of these great presentations. And I'm going to be talking about a little bit of history, a little bit of future, and I promise there's a new product announcement in the middle there. So stick around. So, I am responsible for the AR engineering and eighth wall and research at Niantic. And I have a long career in this kind of business, and I thought I'd go into that a little bit. So I worked at Silicon Graphics in the 90s, did virtual reality when it was $100,000 an eyeball. So $200,000, Disney Quest actually, was built on top of that hardware. We built OpenGL, so built APIs and platforms there. It's SGI. I started a company called Thank you. I started a company called Intrinsic Graphics, which was a game platform, cross-platform in the year 2000. And what it was Unity 15 years too early. And so we learned a lot, and actually that platform is still in use at Activision today. It was acquired by Vicarious and went to Activision. Then started a company with John Henke and several other people at Niantic called Keyhole, and built a geographic language called KML, which became a platform for geodata. That platform was interesting enough that Google bought us, and John and I spent several years at Google. We built Geo, along again with many of the people in this room, and learned a lot about Maps and Maps APIs, and obviously KML, and built more platforms with more developers and all of the education there. I then went off and went to Uber and worked on self-driving cars and machine learning, and recently joined Niantic to lead this group, and have had a blast doing it. So I'm going to talk about some history now. I'm also a professor at the University of Kansas, and I've gotten a little bit of professorial, and talk about the question of where am I now? Because it's central to what I build today, but it's also got some historical precedents. In the old days, in the navigation on oceans, back before we knew where we were going, it was very hard to figure out where you were. In particular, ships didn't actually go straight to their destination. They went to a latitude and then did what were called eastings or westings. They would just follow latitude because they could figure out the latitude based on the stars and the sun, but they did not know where they were in longitude. And the reason was there's no way to know unless you know exactly what time it is. And so for hundreds of years, you had to basically go to a latitude and then run into land, and then if you had a map of that land, you could then figure out where you were. So an early visual positioning system was point the ship in a direction and try to recognize the coastline. So big technology solution was the invention of an accurate transportable clock that turned into a watch. Because if you knew exactly what time it was in London or in GMT, you could derive where you were in longitude at any given time. And this helped with navigation immensely. But it was a small step towards just navigating with maps. So it enabled people to draw much more accurate maps. And as you know, when you try to find yourself, one of the big things maps helps you is visually orient you on where you are. Where am I now? And you look at landmarks, you look at points, water is usually a big guidance. Pictures are worth 1,000 words. We launched satellite imagery with Keyhole, but the big launch of satellite imagery was actually when we added it to Google Maps in 2005. It was very exciting because people had never been able to just open a browser and look at satellite imagery before. And the first thing that they did on Google Maps and on Google Earth was figure out where they were born. They would look at their house. This is the first thing everybody does, and I'll plead that I did it too. So the center of Google Earth is actually the apartment where I grew up, and I changed it sneakily, and Bill Kilday to this day probably still hasn't forgiven me. But people orient themselves visually, and these pictures of the top down of, Lawrence, Kansas was actually, a very powerful way of re-exploring my hometown, even though I was off in California. So how do we find ourselves today? Well, GPS. It's the best thing out there at the moment, and it's an amazing invention, started in 1973 with the US military, and it was going to be military only until a Korean airline was shot down over Russia because it didn't know where it was, and it violated airspace and bad things happened. So the US said, we're going to open it up to everybody, and in 2000, Bill Clinton actually signed something that said, we're not even going to degrade it anymore. GPS is you're going to get best of GPS for all consumer devices, and that changed the world because now you could have these handheld GPS devices that were accurate, that were good enough for turn-by-turn directions, and people were able to find their way around. Other countries decided we can't depend on the US military, so they made their own versions of it, and that helped all of us because a single chipset can actually talk to GLONASS, Beidou, and Galileo, and you get a slightly better quality because you can see more of these satellites in the sky. One thing that's not well known is that there's going to be an upgrade to GPS. It's already happening, but it won't be fully deployed until 2027. It's called L5, and it greatly improves accuracy because, unfortunately, GPS is not terribly accurate. So 15-meter error, that's 45 feet, that's a big error. With some additional information that you can get either downloaded or sent over the wire, you can get that error down to about 5 meters. If they deploy L5, it's actually going to only be 30-centimeter error, which is 1 foot. Let's get that about right. So that's really good, but it's coming. But the dirty little secret of GPS is that it doesn't work everywhere, and it doesn't work, in buildings like this one necessarily. Sometimes it does, but it's not very accurate. Definitely doesn't work in tunnels. Doesn't work in underground parking garages, for example. But the big problem, and we see it here, everybody here knows this, walking around San Francisco, big skyscrapers do terrible things to GPS. And the reason is reflections and multipath. And you end up, you watch your Pokemon Go character running back and forth across the neighborhood, and you get credit for steps that you didn't take any of. Speaking from experience. So, what can you do about it? Well, I started working on self-driving cars at Uber, but actually Waymo started like 8 years before. And the interesting thing is that Waymo was started, actually from within my group. Sebastian Thrun and several of the engineers went off and decided to do self-driving cars. They immediately went off into a dark corner, and they didn't talk to Google Maps pretty much at all, because they realized that they didn't need Google Maps. Google Maps was not good enough to help self-driving cars get around. They have these very expensive sensors, LiDAR, multiple cameras, all sorts of extra information about where the car is. The reason they do this is they need to know where they are within 10 centimeters. They need to keep their mirrors inside the lane so they don't hit the other cars. And so that's actually pretty hard. So how do they do that? Well, it turns out that Waymo and Uber and Cruise and everybody else who's doing self-driving cars right now is building very high-resolution maps. And they're doing it for a couple of reasons. One is so that they know where the lights are for turn signals, but they're also doing it for localization, because they need to know exactly within 10 centimeters where they are, and the only way they can do that is effectively create a map of everywhere they could go, and then send out their LiDAR and camera pictures and compare it to this map. So they built a visual positioning system that they use to locate themselves, and it works wherever they've created the map, including parking garages, tunnels, and all those hard places, and downtown San Francisco. So the reason that self-driving cars are in Phoenix, San Francisco, and a few other places is because that's where they have successfully mapped and kept that map updated. Now, that's great, but there's two problems with it. It doesn't scale unless you deploy it as a service, and that's one of the things that Waymo's use is they actually have several hundred cars running in Phoenix. And if we want to be successful in San Francisco, you're going to see the various companies put several hundred cars on the road to keep that map up to date. And they do this by basically comparing their position of the car, looking at the corners of buildings, and matching the feature set of the high-resolution maps they have. And this allows them to stay in their lane, although I do notice this particular picture fails to stay in its lane. But you get the idea. So what does that mean? Well, in phones, we actually have a great collection of sensors. The accelerometer, the gyro, the camera are really good. The magnetometer, the compass, many of you know is pretty bad. And GPS, as we've just discussed, can be terrible. So what are we going to do about it? Well, you've spent the last day and a half hearing what we've been working on. We've been building a system for phones and in the future for glasses that help locate you exactly where you are. Because the problem is not just where am I, but with VPS, it's where am I looking? Exactly where am I looking? What is my pose? And that's hard. And so, glasses will be utterly useless without it. And phone AR experiences don't work well unless you know exactly what you're looking at and it's stable over time. If you get it and it works well, you can have pictures like this. But this is still a fantasy picture. Even the best GPS on a perfect day can't hit that building outline exactly as you see it there. We want to be able to get to this point everywhere that people go. But the other problem is that, people go not on the road. They're walking in places like all of the places that we focused on at Niantic, all of those waste spots that are in parks and in walking areas. This is where people spend their time. If we can do that, we can enable gameplay like this. And this is an example video created that shows what we can hopefully do in Pokemon Go if we have a VPS that works across an entire park. So this is what we're aiming at. This is why we are investing in location. But we want to bring you along for the ride. And you've seen some of this. This is Peridot. John showed this yesterday, and I've been playing it, and it's a lot of fun, and it's truly a beautiful game. But it really does use many of the features of ARDK, and is taught us so much about how to make it better and more usable. So it's great that we've had this developer pushing us hard on these features. Now, of course, this one you've seen many times, just over there. Impresses me because it shows the precision that you can get to when you attach the chain to the anchor, right? That doesn't happen if you don't have very precise location. That's a very hard problem. And being able to overlay and precisely match the geometry of places like this, just this demo blew me away. All of these great examples that you've seen, all the stuff you've been working on. Well, here's the announcement. So you've heard about Scaniverse. Many of you have used it for collecting data. It democratizes the creation of 3D content. And we acquired the team that built Scaniverse. And that team has been improving Scaniverse and also working on some new stuff. So first of all, the announcement is Scaniverse has a new version as of today that has improved detail, especially for smaller objects, say that thing of bread that you saw in the first spin. That will get even better with the new version of Scaniverse. But that same team is also helping to work on VPS. So many of the early beta users of VPS were using Scaniverse to collect the models and map their experimental sites. So we built, this team of one person, by the way, was able to add that capability, and all of you were able to, or some of you were able to use it. Now that capability of scanning high-quality 3D geometry is, I think, really powerful. It enables game developers, content developers, artists to quickly get new objects into their games. But could it do more? That same scanning framework that was in and is in Scaniverse is being put into an SDK. And it has two capabilities. One of them is to help your games collect data to make maps. So not only you, through the Wayfarer app, will be able to manually create it, but you'll be able to put this SDK in your library and ask your users to help improve the maps or add locations that you would like to have your game go visit. And so that's capability number one. And this will be compatible, and it will upload data, and we'll start to make maps with it just like we do with the Wayfarer app and with Pigo users and everybody else. So that's capability number one. Capability number two is that this is the full Scaniverse geometry collection experience in API. You will now have world-class scanning capabilities that you can give to your users so they can bring their content into your game. And no LiDAR required. So many of your users, not just those iPhone 12 and 13 folks, can actually start to bring their content into your games. And the only caveat is that 2 words at the bottom, it's coming soon. However, the video you're looking at is real. That's actually running in SDK form separately, and we're working on productizing it right now. So I'm not going to promise a date, but it's soon enough that you should think about designing your game and your capabilities to get us to this point, because it's actually really important to us that your games, like Pokemon Go and like Ingress, start helping build the map. Because these maps only work if we have data that covers where people go and where people are. And we need more of it. We're always going to need more of it, both to keep it up to date and to cover more areas. And so we're very excited to offer this and enable this technology, and hope that in the near term you can start to integrate that into your game. The other thing that you saw earlier in the several great presentations was about our semantic maps. And we have some great real-time semantic map recognition today. And you saw, I guess they wouldn't commit to a date on some of the stuff that they showed you, but some great new capabilities are coming. But I have this vision that we're not just going to do this for real time. We're going to start to create semantic map geometry that you can go pull down and figure out the world around you and design your gameplay around, so that, think of it as kind of like the game board features you saw, but at a much broader, more specific scale and able to be done remotely. So my goal in life is to produce a semantic map better than this for the entire world that developers can design and build experiences around, not just games. And the team we have working on this is world-class, and the data that we're collecting for VPS is all 100% applicable to this problem. So my goal long-term, and this does not say coming soon, by the way, is to be able to produce this kind of technology so that developers can get access to a very detailed map of the world. So we're going to enable scans, obviously through our gamers today, through Pigo. We're helping Lightship developers like yourself enable map scanning in their own games, but also ingest 3D geometry into them for your own gameplay. But we need your developers and our users to make the maps more fresh and have higher coverage. We want it at depth, semantically, and as you've seen, all the maps that are created are available both to ARDK developers and to eighth wall developers. And so the breadth of the capabilities and experiences you're able to get to are going to be incredible. And I think the most important part here is that you've seen some great eighth wall capabilities shown. If you've sat through a couple of the presentations, that video of the VPS, that was done just really fast. He won't say how soon you'll get it in your hands, but I can say there it is coming very soon. Imagine creating snack-sized versions of your game that intro on eighth wall, but use the same content, have kind of the same interactions, and they are just the entree to share your game idea that onboards the user. And if you want to get the full thing, go hit the download button. Think of it as an acquisition vehicle, because we believe that the eighth wall content that you're seeing are great ads. They are great opportunities to advertise anything, brands and everything else, but also AR experiences. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that coming in the near future. So over the last day and a half, you've learned a lot about what we're working on. but that's only a snapshot in time. We've given you a little bit of coming soon, but we have a great team that has just blown me away in their capabilities. And with Eighth Wall being added to it, it's been an amazing combination to watch as we brought these teams together. We're not stopping. We're going to do everything we can to make AR as successful as you are capable of making the experiences. Because that's the other thing. The only way AR is going to succeed is if people in this room invent the AR experiences that just blow people away, that make them interact with the world and make them interact with each other in a better way. So, final words. I think we can summit mountains when we do it together, and you guys have done some amazing things so far, but we have a lot more to do and would love your help doing it. So thank you very much.